Hello. Today I'm going to be making a future-based track. I'm going to be referencing this song. Cool. So everyone's heard this track. I've already created two reference MIDIs. So one's the lead, and the other is the route note, which is here. Cool. So the reason why I use a reference track is it just improves my workflow. I don't do it all the time. It's more or less just to get the route ideas from a song that I already like, and I try to add on top of them. So the first thing I do when I'm using a reference track, or even writing a track in general, is I like to get my bass idea down on piano. Cool, so now that I have my route note and the melody from the RL Grime track inside my MIDI, what I normally like to do is take the leads and put them somewhere else, just as a reference for later. So now I'm going to do some chords. Cool, so I've deleted the melody and I'm just going to go with these chords that I have here. I'm just going to pretty much copy and paste these across each, and then use A as like the harmony. What I'm going to do now is add like the human element to make the piano sound more organic. First of all, I'll go into why this sounds so computerized. Main reason is every single note is hitting at the same velocity, and every single note is quantized. Like, humans don't do that. Humans don't play the exact same notes at the same time at the same velocity on a real piano. Doesn't happen. So I like to add the human error myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten all these notes so it gives me some leeway to play with. So I'm just going to go through each note and then decide with my ears and what I think works, what velocity they should be at. So I'm going to hold down Alt. This is going to come up. I'm going to click and drag down. It's going to change the velocity of D. I'm going to do the same for each of these. Give them all separate velocities. I'm going to leave this almost where it is, and now I'm going to add small adjustments to when the notes start. Cool, so now that I've adjusted the velocity to the way I like it, I think it sounds way better. You could always copy paste these for each chord, so you've got the same velocity and different note start times. You can just copy and paste this for each one, but then that also gets rid of the human error element. One of the main things I do when I'm transposing, once I've done a chord and I've either referenced a song or I've just written chords from scratch, I like to transpose up and down just to get like a better feeling of where the track can go. Another thing that I look out for when I'm transposing is checking where the route notes are. So if I was to transpose to a D, probably not a D. Okay, we'll use, I've transposed to C here. If I transpose my chords to C and my route notes are playing C, E, G, and D, it might sound really good, but if you're trying to get your track to be played in like a club setting, if you're using a lot of sub, the sub won't really punch through. Like, say if you're using a static sub bass instead of like just a kick, C plays at like negative 30 hertz or something, not negative, but around 30 hertz. Most subs in nightclubs, I think it's like 40 or maybe even 35. So I like to try and make my route notes stay within the 40 to I think it's 140 range, which is like D all the way up to A. Oh, another thing with doing the velocities with each note. Generally, whichever note is the highest in the velocity is the focus point. So you can change the focus point of each chord by just raising the velocity. This is an example. Here's the first two chords. So now I'll turn down the velocity of the A, bring up the G. gives a completely different feel to the chords, in my opinion. It's really, really cool to mess around with. Alright, back to this melody. I'm going to drop this back in. I'm going to try and recreate a melody off of what's here. I'm just going to make my own version.
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
Cool, so that's the basic melody that I'm going to roll with for now. Just going to add a variation between bars. The basic idea for the melody is here, and then I've just duplicated over, and then I've added a variation between the bars so it doesn't sound so stagnant, which is here. So I've got an extended F instead of leading up to a G. And then the second set of bars, I have another like little ear candy piece. So most people will be expecting the A to be elongated to the bar and then follow the same melody. Instead, I've just added this F here. And then follows the melody again. And then for this last bar, instead of rolling from an A to an A up an octave, it's gone down to G. And I'm resting at the note just below A. I think that sounds wicked. I have my melody idea, and now all I have to do is make all the weird sounds and make everything cohesive. Alright, so I'm going to try and transpose again now that I have the melody to see if I can get a different feel for the song, find something I may like better. I've decided to go with different route notes, so I just prefer it sounds cooler in my ears. First thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and recreate this melody using a bunch of resampling and serum patches. Cool, so I made this weird sound. I don't know if I'm going to use it yet. But yeah, so pretty much I've just used a basic shape. I forgot what that one's called, and then this is just a sine wave, just FM'd over, and then I got this weird sound without the effects. It's pretty basic. And then if I want to add like movement to the sound, I can automate this guy and also this guy. I haven't set up the macros yet, but the real oomph to the sound is the distortion and delay. I'm pretty sure I'm going to use the synth as a layer and try and keep it mainly stereo, and then my second synth will be in mono, and that'll be kind of leading the whole thing. For the second synth, I've just copied it over. I just duplicated the first one, and then I've gone down to the sawtooth, found another wavetable, and just adjusted some of these knobs here. And then I've used chorus to give it a bit more width, and then the compressor, which is just multi-band, just to extend the sound a bit. This is what they sound like together. Yeah, it just sounds really interesting, to be honest. These synths sound really cool. There's one big thing that I like to do during my creative process, and that's adding a mono channel to my master. I like to make sure that I've got clarity in mono as well as stereo. If you have a very stereo track and someone only has a system that outputs in mono, then your track's going to lose a lot of oomph. So I like to swap between mono and stereo just to be able to tell how much space I've got. So if I was to solo this synth here, sounds nice and loud and wide, and then if I swap to mono, a lot of the volume is gone and a lot of the width. That's why I've layered it with this synth here, which is primarily in mono, but right now this is how they sound. So just that extra mono synth helps the mono mix out a bunch. Cool, so what I've done here with some basic processing is just OTT, brought down the amount by 40%. The reason I do that is because OTT at 100% is just crazy. It's just super crazy. You can probably do it on a bunch of dubstep basses, but I personally don't like having it at 100%. What I've also done is, on the stereo synth, I've added an EQ and then I've swapped it to mid-side, and in the mid profile I've dropped out around 2.5. The reason I've done that is so that the mono frequencies of my mono synth push through more and there's less issues with phase. So I've boosted here in the mono frequency on the mono synth at around 2.5, so now there'll be less clashing. I've also brought down the stereo around 2.5 as well, just so there's more clarity for the stereo synth. Cool, so now that we have the synths and the basic piano idea, if I play them together, they will sound pretty cool. So Alright, sounds really cool. I have noticed a few things that I'd like to change with the basic chord, idea. I'm going to delete the lead from the piano. For me, it feels natural for there to be a note change here. That just sounds like it'll carry the melody further in the drop, but I will probably keep this basic 4-bar piano idea for the intro. Cool, so the next thing I like to do is, now that I have the lead synth, I like to write the drop first before the intro. Just helps my workflow. So for this basic sub, just use Serum. I use a sub, a couple octaves down. I use a bright noise, and then I add some distortion to add harmonics. Without the bright noise, just sounds like that. If I add the white noise, it gives it like a bit more crunch to the bass. I'm going to see what a synth underneath this will sound like. So I've got my leads, but sometimes the leads can carry the song a bit too well for me to add synth underneath, but we'll have a crack. So I'm just going to use a basic initial preset. I've added a bend so the phase will be a little different. Actually, I might use a mirror. The reason I adjust the phase for most of my leads is phase issues. There's such a big thing when you're doing anything synth related. So I have a set of chords that are primarily mono. I have added a bit of hyperdimension expander, basic EQing, haven't used OTT, probably will later. Just boosted, lowered the, and the second synth is more stereo based, just to make it wider. And this one is a different shape with a different phase, so it doesn't phase out this other one. Sounds pretty boring. I don't want it to stand out compared to the leads, so I want the leads to be the primary thing, so I've gain staged them so they're a bit lower. Sounding pretty sweet so far. Oh, especially with the sub. Alright, so what I'm going to add now is I'm going to add a mid bass to just fill out the lower mid frequency range. Simple thing I do with mid bass is duplicate the sub, just use a sawtooth, change the phase. That's pretty much it. And I have used unison to widen the sound a little bit. Up next, what I generally do is, I have the basic lead here, but I like to resample quite a bit. So I will try and find a sample that I can use that follows this lead pattern. So what I've done here is I put the this vocal sample that I like. I can feel. I've created a MIDI and then sent the vocal hook that I like into the MIDI to just mess around with it, really. I like to use vocal samples because they have a dynamic change, like they pitch shift a little bit, the velocity is a bit different. So now I'm going to play it back over the lead. This is going to be out of key, so I'm just going to play it over the lead and then transpose up and down until I find the correct key. So this vocal is quite stereo. The sample itself is quite stereo, so I'm going to use utility to make it mono because I'd prefer it to sit in the mono mix. A lot of people with utility, they end up when they want to bring down the stereo signal, they end up bringing down the width. Doesn't work too bad on this, but I like to, oops, not that one. I like to just have a left channel or a right channel, because then it's always going to be mono, but it won't phase out if I bring the width down. Luckily there's not many phase issues in the mono section with this, but I'm going to go with the left channel only anyway. So I'm just going to do some post-processing. I'm going to use a multi-band compressor. I'm not going to use OTT, I'm going to use waves. What I'm going to do with this is just boost the overall dB signal. Just going to find the harsher side of the frequencies. Just around there. Going to compress them a bit. So I'm not trying to have them stand out in the mix, I just want them to be almost like a feature, like they glue together with the current melody. Alright, so I was going to originally mix this in mono, and then maybe create a bit of width with a reverb, but I actually kind of like the vocal how it is, where it's stereo, so I'm going to turn off the mono thing that I had on. Alright, let's try and do some acoustic drums. So I'll find an acoustic drum. Okay, so I like to tune my drums quite a lot, so the way I do it is, it doesn't work as well with kicks, but we'll do it anyway just because. So the way kicks work is it's hard to find the fundamental frequency, because a kick is pretty much like a pitch bend on a sub channel. Do you know what I mean? But we can go through it anyway. So we can tell that it's ending on F. Using Spectrum, fundamental frequency always ends on F, so I'm pretty sure our track is in F. So what I use is I use a frequency shifter, and I listen to the kick, go through Spectrum, find this channel, and I want to go to F sharp. So we're at like 43 hertz, so I need to be at like 46 hertz for it to be an F sharp. So I can just go into frequency shifter and type 3 plus 3, and now we're at G. So let's bring this down to 2. That'll do for now. Honestly, kicks aren't too much of a worry. The main thing that I try to tune are my snares. For me, snares, they just sound cleaner and more cohesive in the mix once they're tuned to the track. Cool, so now I'm going to layer this kick. I'm going to bring the dB range down about 6. I'm going to try and find a kick that sits around the 182 mark. No, the 90 mark. So I want a kick that's hitting like the low mids. I might even get rid of this kick because it's playing pretty low in the sub range, but I could just EQ it out. Luckily for me, I actually have a bunch of kicks already in key. I like that. Sounds kind of acoustic. It's not too crazy on the ears. So the fundamental frequency, according to Somatics, will be F sharp. Oh yeah. So this is where it starts, and then the pitch bend happens, and we end up at G. I'm going to group these, put this into channel. Alright, so for these kicks to cut through, I obviously need sidechain, and I'm going to set that up right now. So a lot of people like to use volume automation. Nothing wrong with volume automation, but I'm just going to use a sidechain compressor for now, just because it makes my workflow way easier. Instead of having to copy and paste all of these volume automations, I can just have a controller. I can use a ghost kick. So I'll go through the process on how I do my my sidechain compression. So I'll create a channel, we'll name it sidechain. This is going to be called sidechain kick. What I like to do is just make it super small. I'm going to turn the channel off so that the audio isn't playing. I'm going to get my compressor. The reason that I did like a really small hat is because the controller is just reading the waveform. It's like, so the smaller the waveform, the more room I have to play around with. I'm going to put that on my synths, turn it onto sidechain, route it to sidechain kick. I'm going to turn this on so I can see it better. Now we can see it working. So I'm going to turn the ratio up. Cool, and then I'm going to set the look to 10 ms, so it looks 10 milliseconds in the future to ready itself for the sidechain, to ready itself for the ghost kick. Cool, and then I can just copy and paste this to all my channels for now. Cool, so that kick's cutting through okay. If I really wanted the lower frequency range to pump a bit more, I'd probably make the sidechain release a bit longer so it goes with the kick, but I'm happy with it how it is now. I am going to add a top kick, so just add a little more oomph to my current kicks. Cool, so I got my kick down, sounding alright in my headphones, so just going to move on to the snares. Another thing I normally do with the kicks, actually, before I move on, I mess around with compression. So you got to be really careful with compressing kicks and stuff like that, because you lose quite a lot of dynamic range, but you can be pretty bare minimum on it. Helps to glue the sound together. Doesn't sound too bad, I'm going to keep that. Alright, up next is the snares. So I can cheat and just find a snare at F sharp. You can also have it doesn't have to play with the first initial route note. You don't have to tune your drums to the first initial route note of your track. You can tune it to almost any of these chords really. I'd probably say A is better, because A is that harmonic chord that can just carry the whole track. But I'm probably going to stick with F. I like the snare, I like real heavy, like white noise snares, so I'm going to keep this one. Probably going to cut out some of the harsher frequencies. And you can see the fundamental frequency hitting here for the snare. And this should be on F, so if we go in here, we find the frequency range. No, it should be on A sharp, so it should be playing around here. Yeah, and that's where it's playing. So it's a fundamental frequency. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is potentially find another snare that has a little more crunch to it. I can probably add more crunch using the snare, but I might just bring this one down a bit and layer it so it's a bit more me. Alright, so I didn't go over it properly with the kick, so I'll do it now with the snares. So when you're tuning a snare, like this cool sounding snare, if I put this in here, just listen to it. First thing I do to find, I have to find the fundamental note of the snare. So at your spectrum, fundamental is sitting at G, looks like. Yeah, it's sitting at G, 200 hertz, and then there's like resonating frequencies here. Say if I want it to be at an F, which is about 175 hertz. I need to come down, so that's 200, I want to go 175, so I take 25. So I open up frequency shifter, and then I change the frequency to -25. So yep, so now the fundamental frequency has been skipped from G to F. So that's what I normally do with my snares. I love tuning my stuff. I don't normally tune anything else. Sometimes my kicks, but not all the time. Transposing just gives you a bunch of artifacts. So yeah, just use frequency shifter. So in this video we went through the process of making the instruments more organic by adding human error. You can practice this pretty easily using, I think there's a couple of Ableton stock piano samples that you can work with. We also went through tuning drums using the frequency shifter. The reason that we use the frequency shifter instead of just transposing is because if we were to transpose a snare and it was just down like 1, so you use transpose down 1, say that the fundamental frequency is sitting at like a 200 hertz. That fundamental frequency is only going down maybe like 20 hertz, going down 1 transpose thing. But you're also bringing down the frequency range, the higher frequency range, and they're jumping massive amounts. So for like say if it's the fundamental frequency of F is coming down to an E, and the higher frequency range, you're jumping thousands of frequencies at one point. But the frequency shifter, it only moves things in hertz values and not the entire sample. So it'll bring down, say if you bring down 20 hertz, it takes away 20 hertz from each range instead of transposing like the entire signal. So I hope this was informative to you guys. I'll be continuing this track in some later videos. My next video I'll probably be going over some Illenium stuff. I've heard quite a few people are interested in how he does his sound